Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our lectures on the creative process as we continue our discussion of the sixth aspect of the creative process, the return home. This is where we take our creative ideas and we manifest them. We actually create something out of them. For a lot of people, they think of creativity as just, playing around with ideas and just having a great imagination. But, in order to create something, you have to make something, right? So we talked about last time how the creative process can be seen in three different parts. There is this orderly aspect of the creative process, right? This is what we're familiar with. This is where we learn our skills, our habits, where we are given a structure, where we're given goals and values from our culture or from our teachers, from our parents. In order to be creative, we have to venture out beyond that and experiment, explore, and play around, think divergently. One of those is very chaotic, right? This latter one. And then the earlier one is more stable. The ordinary world feels safe, while the other aspects feel a little bit dangerous because there's no formal structure because we left it behind. We questioned it. So the sixth aspect is about how to integrate both sides of ourselves, the side that wants order with the side that wants to explore. And it's that tension between the two that can propel us to create, to make something new. But for a lot of us, as we go through our projects, this might be the hardest stage, right? The hardest aspect, because this requires you to actually physically make stuff. This is where all the hard work goes into transforming something. And if we take a look at this in terms of your life, this is where you put in all the hard work to grow and to change and to evolve, which is not so easy. For a lot of us, we get stuck because we just don't know what the right decisions are to make or how to best organize our time, or our minds are just full of ideas and it's just so confused that we just don't have a clear sense of what we should do next. And that makes sense because you don't have the ordinary world rules to tell you what to do next, right? So we dealt with that last lecture. We talked about how to overcome psychic disorder. Another issue they might be facing as you try to manifest something new is just the sense of complacency, the sense of um, lethargy, right? Being so lethargic and not wanting to do anything, right? You don't want to work on this, or you don't want to make the change in your life or transform your life into something different. It just takes so much work, just so much effort. Right? This is often because we are taking the path of least effort. We're trying to conserve our resources. So we often don't do something unless there's energy behind it, which is why procrastination is so common, right? We're conserving, and then we get close to the deadline. Then we have energy to get stuff done. But instead of just waiting for that to happen, what can we do to manufacture that energy for ourselves, or make it more likely for that juice to arise for our projects and for making changes in our lives? Well, I it's no wonder why this is hard, right? The creative process has so many obstacles that we've learned about throughout our class. I mean, overcoming complacency, overcoming fear, overcoming the habits and conditioning that was ingrained in us through our lives, overcoming social pressures, overcoming self-criticism, overcoming this need to feel like we have to control everything. I mean, it's no wonder that a lot of us don't manifest our business ideas. So it's no wonder why a lot of us don't take our ideas for a story and share them with others. It's no wonder why we might want to find a new job, but we don't put the effort into, going back to school and reinventing ourselves. It's not easy. So what can we do? What can we do to push ourselves through these obstacles? As we learned about in the beginning of our course, this might be why the one commonality amongst those who are creative is motivation. We need that motivation to propel us through all of these obstacles. So this is what I had you think about when watching these two video clips. What can we learn about them to teach us how to motivate ourselves and motivate other people? So the first video clip was a compilation of motivational scenes from movies. What can you learn from there that we can apply to motivating ourselves or other people? Were there certain phrases or words that were uttered in those scenes? Was it the urgency that the speakers had? What about the lecture, right? Here is a lecture that was given supposedly as within a series of lectures where professors pretend like this is their last lecture ever, and then they present it to students. In this case, it was this professor's last lecture. Why was this so motivating for so many people that the original lecture was viewed 19 million times? Why was this lecture so motivational that people bought the book that was based off this lecture and made it a bestseller? Was it the words? Was it the message? Was it this personal story that we could relate to? Maybe all of those played a part. But let's put it this way. If I wrote down the speeches from those motivational film clips, I just wrote them all down and gave them to you, would you be motivated? Would you be as inspired? If I wrote down the lecture that this professor gave and then just gave you a copy of the speech, right? Gave you a copy of his lecture notes, would you be as inspired, or would people be as inspired to watch or to resend it or to buy the book? What can we learn from these things? What's the thing that makes these clips motivational? Well, think back to yourself. We've all gone through this process in some way, right? We've all gone through it. We've all had some sort of transition in our lives, some sort of change, some sort of growth. And oftentimes, maybe not of our choice. We were forced upon it. How did you make it through that disorder? How did you overcome this feeling of chaos that leads to psychic disorder and that leads to lethargy? How did you do it? Well, as I mentioned a second ago, some of you felt like you were forced to do it. But really, is there anything that can force you to do anything? When you say you're forced to, what you probably really mean is that it was more painful not to do it, right? As in, you'd be put in prison, or your life would be horrible if you stayed in the ordinary world, or your parents would have abandoned you if you didn't follow them across the ocean to a different country. So it probably isn't that you were forced to, but that the consequences of you not going through the change, of not leaving your ordinary world behind, that was probably worse, right? That propelled you. Well, what else propelled you? Maybe you just had a vision of what you wanted, right? Maybe there was something that you were looking forward to, and that propelled you to make it through the disorder, right? Dreaming of how awesome it would be on the other side after you completed your degree, started your new job, found your new relationship, moved to a different state, went to the new school. So what is it there then? What do those things tell us about what might be useful to be to motivate ourselves and other people? Can you see how it could all be tied to emotions, right? The speeches were emotional. They caused us to feel a certain way. The lecture was emotional. It caused us to feel a certain way. When you have a dream about where you want to go, that vision probably makes you feel a certain way, get excited about it. I bet you when you're writing down your 5-year goals in our class, if you just wrote them down and thought about them for a little bit, you may have gotten a little excited about how cool it would be to have this much money, or lose this much weight, or have this type of job, or have this type of relationship. It feels good, right, to dream about those things. And if you thought about how awful it is to not move forward, right, what would happen if you did not change? Well, that negative feeling also propels us, right? That feeling of how bad things could be could also move us forward. It's that emotion that drives us. I mean, take a look at the word emotion, energy for motion. So when we take a look at what we can do to motivate ourselves and other people, we need to find some way to fuel those feelings, right? To stir those feelings of excitement. Now, you can also stir the feelings of fear, like I have to move forward because I don't want to stick at this job, or I have to move forward and change because I don't want to have to live in this situation, whatever it is you're trying to leave behind. You may also want to think about the stuff you want to leave behind and flip it, right? If you want to leave behind a certain relationship, instead of focusing on how bad that is, you can focus on how much better things could be What type of great relationship could be out there, and use that positive fuel to move you. Instead of thinking about how bad your job is now and having that propel you, which could work, you might want to also think about, imagine your ideal job and let that positive energy pull you forward. But either way, we're talking about feelings, right? We're talking about energy, emotions to propel us. I mean, if you've ever been part of some sort of team, right, where you had a coach or instructor, you remember those days where they'd try to fire you up, and they would shout and yell or say things that maybe don't make any sense, but they moved you, right? It's the feeling that we need to give us energy to move. Interestingly enough, we can enter states where we naturally feel positive, and that positive feeling can naturally propel us forward. And those states, as we mentioned last time, are these flow states. If we can enter flow states, we can naturally have this positive feeling that propels us towards doing stuff. Okay, so what do you mean by flow states? There was a study done by psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he gave various people pagers that are part of the study, and every once in a while they would be paged and asked, hey, what are you doing right now, and how are you feeling? Right? What are you doing right now, and how are you feeling? And he would get a bunch of data, and he would notice that people often felt best, right? Often felt most positive when they were in the middle of doing something. So people would say things like, yeah, right now I feel really good. I'm in the middle of this project at work, and things are just flowing out of me. Or people would say, oh, I'm feeling great right now. I'm working on this painting, and the idea is just flowing through my hand. Or a musician be saying, oh, I'm feeling great right now. And what I'm doing, well, I'm making the song, and the song is just creating itself. It's just flowing out of my instrument. All of these people, when they were feeling at their optimum, used words like they were lost in the activity, that time seemed to pass by, and they didn't notice that even though they started at noon, it was like 2 a.m. in the morning because of how much time flew by. How ideas would just flow out of them, not like they were consciously creating them, but the ideas would just flow out of them. Can you relate to that at all, where you lost track of time because you're so engaged with what you were doing? You were so involved with some sort of task or project or creative endeavor that you didn't realize that the hours just flew by. It didn't even feel like you were doing it. Things were just coming out of you. This is what's referred to as the flow state. Right? These are states where our actions naturally occur. We have this natural positive feeling to continue that fuels us, and it fuels us so much that we neglect the passage of time. How awesome would it be to be in those states when you're working on your project? How awesome would it be to get your life to feel like that? So how can we enter those states? How can we make those states more likely? Based upon the studies, I'll give you a few suggestions. One is to have clear goals for yourself. And this is something we talked about with psychic disorder, right? What's useful is to have very clear, meaningful goals, to have a clear sense for the purpose of what it is you are doing. Now imagine why this is the case, right? If you have a clear goal, if you have a clear purpose, then there's an obvious target. And that target can then organize all of your ideas. It makes it easier for your mind to clearly organize all the tasks that you have to do, because now there's a clear sense of where they have to lead you. When you're in the disorder aspect of the creative process, you've thrown away your ordinary world, there's no real clear goal because you're experimenting, you're trying out new things to figure out what your goal is. But then you have to have one. You have to create one for yourself. You have to design one for yourself. You have to choose one for yourself. What is it that you ultimately want here? What is it that you ultimately value? And now it's your choice. And then once you choose that, then it acts as like gravity. It acts like something that propel you, that pulls you forward, right? Having that clear goal is sort of a magnet for your time, for your ideas, for your thoughts, for your choices, for your behaviors. And that magnet pulling you forward can place you into flow states. One thing people often do is make it very obvious what it is that they want, what it is that they value, right? People have things like dream boards where they visually represent what it is they want out of life, where it is that they want to go in order to continually remind themselves of what their ultimate purpose is, right? To help remind you of where all your attention, or a majority of your attention, should be drawn towards, focused on. Maybe think of other ways to remind yourself about what it is you ultimately want. I mean, if you think about your projects, you might have just a vague idea of your project, but think about something specific. Think about the feeling that you want from your project. Think about other people that you look up to who've done similar projects and what it's done for them, or how it is that look at what they've created and see that as a model, and maybe you can gain energy from that, right? They can help propel you, make it clear where it is that you want to go. Okay, so what else can we do? Well, one thing we could do is find a way to notice the feedback, to notice the progress that we make as we go through and try to manifest whatever it is we're manifesting. Now, what do we mean by this? Oftentimes we stop, oftentimes we don't continue, or we lack the energy because we think what we do doesn't really matter. And that often comes about because we don't notice that our actions are actually moving us someplace, right? Here's a story. Let's imagine you have a friend, Joe, who wants to lose weight. Let's say he wants to lose 20 pounds by the end of the month because he wants to get ready for his high school reunion. Okay, so Joe works out really hard. He goes on a really good diet, and then he goes on a scale, puts himself on a scale after the first week of exercise and dieting. He looks down the scale and he's bummed out because all that work on exercising and dieting has only led him to lose 1 pound. Horrible. So he says to himself, okay, I'm going to work even harder this week. I'm going to eat even less this week. And he does it. He goes to the gym like every day for 2 hours. He eats salads every day. It looks on the scale. I have to be losing weight now. Looks on the scale. And he's super disappointed because he's only lost another pound. Oh, man. Okay, he says to himself, last chance. I'm going to work out like 4 hours a day. I'm not going to go to the office. I'm just going to go to the gym and spend half the day in the gym. I'm going to fast every day this week. Right? He's like, I have to lose weight now. I have to lose tons of weight now. At the end of the week, goes on the scale, looks down. It says, he's only lost 1 other pound. He gets so disappointed. He quits entirely, goes back to his couch and eats potato chips. What happened to Joe? Well, what happened was that Joe was so focused on the 20 pounds that he didn't notice that he was losing a pound per week. He didn't notice that he was making progress. And if we don't feel like what we do matters, if we don't feel like what we're doing is propelling us someplace, then it feels like we should quit. There's no point to our actions. So we need to find some way to recognize our progress and to celebrate it. Right? Think about that for your projects. Every time you make something, every time you play around with your ideas to create something new, celebrate that. Realize that it's part of the process and that you're moving forward, even though it may not look like what you envision as the end result. Think about your life. It might take a long time for you to go through your classes, do all your tests, get your degree, and then get the job you want. It might be slow going, but after every test, you're a step closer. After every class you take, you're a step closer, right? Acknowledging that progress, celebrating it, paying attention to it can help you get into these flow states, right? Where it feels good. What else could we do? Seemingly, this might be the thing that Mihai Csikszentmihalyi focuses the most. He notices that when we take a look at these people who are naturally in these flow states, they seem to be within a particular channel between skills and the difficulty of the task they're doing, right? So, for instance, if you are trying to do something that's too hard, what are you going to feel? You're going to feel kind of frustrated because it's too hard. If you're doing something that's too easy, right? Not enough challenge for you. What are you going to feel? You're going to feel bored, right? Because it's too easy. So the people that were in flow are the people that were in that channel right in the middle, right between it being too hard and it being too easy. And it's when you're in that sweet spot that you are often found in flow. Because think about what happens when it's not too easy. Think about what happens when it's not too hard. What you're doing gets kind of fun. It gets kind of exciting, right? Um, think about taking a long drive with your parents and how boring it could be to take a long drive, especially if you're like going on a vacation, right? Not so fun because it's too easy. Well, what did they do with you? Do you remember to make time go by? They may have made the driving a game, right? Let's spot all the license plates from out of state. Let's spot all the cars of a particular color, right? They added complexity to what you were doing because when you add complexity, you make it a little more challenging, right? If something is too hard, what could you do to simplify it? Well, if it's too hard, maybe you chop it up into smaller pieces that are easier for you to tackle. If you do something that's too hard, maybe you work on developing your skills so that it's not as hard. If it's too difficult, you might want to gather people to help you who have the skills that you don't quite have at the time. If it's too hard, you might want to give yourself more time to do it. Just like if it was too easy, you might want to give yourself less time. If it's too easy, you might want to make it a little more complicated. If it's too easy, you might want to give yourself handicaps. Like, I'll just do this by myself, or I'll just do this without spending so much money, or right, some sort of handicap. You can make it so that you are more likely to be within that flow channel. Think about your projects. What could you do if it's too easy? What could you do if it's too hard to get you into that balance state? If that's where you are in life right now, right? If where you want to go might be a little bit daunting to you, you have this dream of being a CEO of a company, what could you do to make that a little less daunting? If you have this goal of just finding a different partner who's not as bad as your current one, maybe that's not so exciting to you. How could you make it a little more challenging? Right? Maybe you more specifically define characteristics or attributes you want from that partner to get you into those flow states. Lastly, what often helps is to follow intrinsic motivations. Okay, so what are intrinsic motivations? Well, let's contrast it with extrinsic. Extrinsic refers to motivations from the outside. So when people say, hey, you do this, you get a reward, or you do something because you're obligated to, well, those are extrinsic. Those are reasons from the outside for you to do something. So just imagine you're an employee and your boss tells you you can get a promotion if, well, the promotion acts as an extrinsic motivator. If you're a student and your teacher says, well, if you do well on this test, you get an A. Well, that's an extrinsic motivator. Or if you're a child and your mom and dad say, here, I'll give you some candy if you clean your room. That's an extrinsic motivator, right? Intrinsic refers from within. So these are things you want to do naturally because you, inside of yourself, are naturally attracted to it. They're things that you love to do. They're ways of acting in the world that really engage you, that really get you going, right? When we take a look at studies on creativity, we see that one of these forms of motivation lead to more creativity than the other. Do you remember which one that is from your reading? It turns out that intrinsic motivation often leads to more creative ideas. So following your intrinsic motivations, things that naturally get you excited, as opposed to doing something out of reward. I mean, think about that. In the study that was mentioned in your textbook, school kids were given, drawing material and asked to just draw whatever they wanted to, and they drew lots of creative images. But when they were judged and told they could get a reward for doing the most creative drawing, well, what happened to creativity? It diminished because now there's pressure, right? Now there is pressure and stress associated with doing something creative. So intrinsic motivation is what's often best needed or best for generating creative ideas. What does it mean for you? What does it mean for you in creating the life you want? What does it mean for you for, finishing your projects? It means you need to somehow engage with what you're doing in a way that naturally excites you. Well, ask yourself, what naturally excites you? Are you a sports person? Are you a person that loves humor? Are you a person that really gets excited for justice? Are you a person that really gets excited when you get to, use your courage? Well, whatever that is, incorporate that into your project. Right? If you're a person that loves to tell jokes and be funny, well, do your project in a way where you laugh. Do your project in a way where you're trying to be funny. If you're a person that loves, social justice and that really gets you excited, well, approach your project in a way where you get to feel as if you are, promoting social justice. And the same thing goes with life in general. If there is a certain goal you have in mind, try to approach it in a way that activates your intrinsic motivators, right? If you are a person that really gets excited about testing your own courage, then approach your goal in life in a way where you get to exercise your courage. If you're a person that really values respect and really values the well-being of others, well, then approach your goals in life in a way that you get to show respect for others. You get to be compassionate for others. You get to help other people, right? There's always some way to approach whatever it is you're doing in a way that stimulates your intrinsic motivators, right? That gets you to feel good about what you are doing. I'm hoping these help somewhat to get you going with your creative projects, to help you finish them. And I obviously also hope, too, that you can apply these to wherever it is that you want to eventually end up in the next stage of your lives. When we come back in our next lecture, we'll talk about an example of how somebody created a system for themselves in order to get into these flow states. And hopefully you can use that example to set up your own flow states.